Hey, good
Hello.
morning.
How's everyone doing?
Doing well. Enjoying this sunny day that we're having.
Oh, nice.
Scott, have you guys been okay with all the rain?
Yeah, our car was like 2 feet away from being smashed by a tree on Saturday.
Ooh.
Oh, yeah.
And then there
It's
was
funny 'cause-
a branch fell on a transformer or a power line right next to our house, and the transformer caught on fire. And it was like spewing like flaming embers into the air that were flying onto our house. So that was pretty fun.
What?
And
Oh.
we like the response time for fire department was like an hour because there were over 900 calls that they were responding to at the moment.
Holy cow.
It was pretty wild. Yeah.
It's funny because everyone has been like, my family has been like texting me being like, are you guys okay? And I'm like, we're at the very edge of the, like, we've gotten a lot of rain and that's about it.
Where do you live?
Near Los Angeles, south of like downtown LA.
Okay. Yeah, I have family in Santa Barbara, and so they've been sending me like pretty crazy pictures.
Yeah, that's like, I feel like that's where the craziness starts, is Santa Barbara, and then like going up.
Yeah.
Leah, you had slides for today?
I do.
If you'd be able to send me those sometime today or when you have a chance, that'd be really cool. Then I can put on the site.
I will send them right now.
And it's 11:01, so I'm just gonna let everybody in right now. Welcome everyone. We're just getting started. We're gonna wait about another minute as people are still joining. All right, we're gonna go ahead and get started. Thank you everyone for joining the 5th meeting of the Microplastics Monitoring Subcommittee of the California Water Quality Monitoring Council. It's been a little over a year since we've been running, and it's great to see everyone's faces. So as a reminder, and for those that have not joined the meeting, this is a community that is open to everyone, and we focus mostly on local issues, but we also cover globally relevant issues related to microplastics. My co-chairs are Dr. Monica Arienzo from the Desert Research Institute and Shelly Moore from the More Plastic Pollution Research Institute, who was not able to join us at this meeting today. In addition to providing a quarterly meeting with updates and entertaining guest speakers, we also have a platform for sharing information and resources with each other. You can check out this bit.ly link. This is take you to the Google Drive, but you'll be learning later today from Shelly Walther about the new Zoltero library that we have to share with each other. We also have lots of resources code on GitHub. You can check it out. Just the Google Drive will take you to the landing point for everything at this point, though. And just to give you a little bit of update on drinking water, I know a lot of the folks that are tuning in are working for drinking water agencies or interested in what's going on. So I'll just start off with that and give a really brief update, and then we'll go to the rest of our agenda. We have Senate Bill 1422, which by now I'm sure just about everyone is familiar with, require the State Water Board to define microplastics and then come up with a 4-year plan for monitoring, which we adopted back in September. So as part of this bill, we've completed some research. We adopted a regulatory definition of microplastics. We've developed some analytical methods for drinking water using Raman and FTIR, and we conducted a human and ecological health risk assessment. All of these research products have been published on our website and in special issues of journals. And in September, we adopted our 4-year plan for monitoring and reporting of microplastics in drinking water. Right now, we are in what's called the pilot phase that will wrap up a little bit later this year. And fall of this year, some water systems will be receiving orders to conduct monitoring for 2 years, followed by a 2-year interim, an interim period of about 6 months, and then another 2 years of monitoring. The pilot phase is currently underway. This is largely research that we need to conduct in order to make sure the monitoring goes smoothly for everyone. We're evaluating some sampling methodologies, providing guidance through the sampling and analysis handbook. Part of that is the handbook that's being developed by this subcommittee. The work group for that is chaired by the Shellys, Shelly Walther and Shelly Moore. We're also going to be conducting a training in person in Northern California and Southern California to train any drinking water system operators to make sure they can collect samples reliably. We're providing time and resources for ELAP accreditation for labs, developing our data infrastructure, and a communication toolkit for water systems. So really briefly, the sampling work that we're doing, we're comparing the existing ASTM method with a sort of novel inline filtration method that we hope will reduce a lot of uncertainties and trouble in collecting these samples. And we're partnering with SWRCB as well as the University of Toronto and Brown and Caldwell to carry that out. And then I won't steal Wynn's thunder from talking about the data portal, but this is another major component of this pilot phase. The Moore Institute is developing this data reporting system for the state that's open source and make sure that the lab that's uploaded is interoperable and reliable. We also have a list of about 30 water systems that would tentatively be receiving monitoring orders. And we want to coordinate with these systems and make sure that we are collecting at the best places that makes most sense and is not redundant with other places that we'd be monitoring. So we are going to be holding a workshop this spring. Look out for the announcement. It'll go out through the LYRIS as well as other channels. And this will be effectively an afternoon workshop to discuss where we're monitoring and field any questions related to the technical components and the actual locations. And after this meeting, we'll issue a final list of where we're going to be monitoring. This will be approved by DDW. So now that we've got the drinking water update out of the way, we can go into the rest of the agenda. And we've got a lot of updates from local partners at this meeting today. We'll be hearing from SWRCB as well as the Moore Institute and what they're doing related to microplastics. We've also got an update from our ELAP folks, OPC, and from Shelly Walther over at the LA County Sanitation District. And then we'll be getting some work group updates from our 2 main working groups, and then have an open discussion. I don't anticipate that this meeting is going to take the 2 hours, as we just have shorter updates than usual, but we'll see. So without further ado, we'll pass it over to our first presenter, Leah Thornton Hampton from SWRCB, who'll be talking to us about the SWRCB Bight program and then the ToMEx 2.0 workshop.
Awesome, thanks, Scott.
Make sure you're a co-host.
Okay.
There you go.
Share screen. All right, can everyone see my screen okay?
Looks great.
maybe? Okay, now, all good? Okay, cool, thank you. Yeah, so for those of you that may or may not know me, maybe you've seen my name floating around everywhere. I'm Leah Thornton Hampton. I'm a scientist here at Southern California Coastal Water Research Project, or SCWRP for short. And I've been here about almost 3 years now, which is kind of hard to believe, working on microplastics. So I'm going to start off with a little bit of review of what we've been doing the past 2 years and how this is kind of launching us into these new projects like the Bight program and ToMEx 2.0. So I'm going to kind of start from the beginning, since I know that a lot of people are tuning in from outside of California, just to make sure that we're all on the same page. So to start, I'm going to really quickly go over some of our big recent milestones that kind of laid the foundation for all the work on microplastics that we're doing right now, which is the laboratory methods evaluation that we just completed, and in the process of getting the rest of the manuscripts from that effort published, along with a health effects workshop. So Scott mentioned earlier in his presentation that there were 2 bills that came out in 2018 from the California State Senate. The Senate Bill 1422, which mandated that we needed to define microplastics, choose a method, and do preliminary monitoring for microplastics in drinking water. And then shortly thereafter, Senate Bill 1263 came out, which was basically saying that we need to figure out a plan to evaluate microplastic risk in the coastal environment. So with these 2 bills having been passed, we had an interesting problem. Methods. So what are the best methods for monitoring? Because nothing at that point had been standardized. And at the same time, if we're going to go out there and start monitoring, how do we put those metrics into context? We don't have any thresholds. How much is too much? So at this point, it was kind of a chicken or the egg problem. And I'll start with the methods. So to address the lack of standardization on methods, SCWRP coordinated a methods evaluation study where we evaluated methods to extract and quantify and characterize microplastics in 4 different matrices. Really the driver was the Senate Bill 1422. So our main focus was on drinking water, but we also included fish tissue, surface water, and sediment as well. And the difference between drinking water and surface water was basically that surface water had other stuff in it that would make it look like something you might pull up from a manta trawl, for example, or a grab sample from the ambient environment. So basically to do this, and we sent them all over to the world, to over 22 labs participated in this study of all different, we have people that have been doing microplastics since the beginning and people that were just now getting into it. And we provided them with standard operating procedures to actually process and analyze these samples, and they submitted their results so that given that we had spiked these samples and created them artificially, we knew exactly what the right answer was, if you will, in terms of the number and type of particles. And the idea behind this project was that now we know something about method performance, and we can provide recommendations for monitoring in drinking water and these other matrices that we also know we'll be interested in down the road. So just to briefly summarize the main outcomes from this effort, first of all, there is a special issue in Chemosphere if you really want to get into all of the data and details of this project. The drinking water results are published, and all of the results from the other matrices are in one big manuscript that is still in review. So I will be sure to let this group know as soon as that manuscript has been published. And as Scott mentioned earlier, the methods for monitoring microplastics in drinking water were adopted by the State Water Board, which was really exciting. And we now have this laboratory accreditation program that you'll hear about later, and the pilot drinking water study that will kick off this year that Scott mentioned in the introduction. So to kind of switch gears, that's kind of what has been happening on the method side and what we're wrapping up now. But what about the health effects side? So to address this side of the coin, we had a health effects workshop where we assembled the top experts across sectors, so government, academia, industry. And we began with a public webinar series in 2020, which if you are interested in watching that, it's on the SCWRP website. And because this was during the height of the pandemic, we met remotely for over a year to work through this workshop. And we focused on both human health and aquatic organism health. So really going big with the different aspects of this that we were trying to tackle at the same time. So we had three main goals on both sides of this, which were to determine how microplastics negatively impact humans and aquatic organisms. So what are the effect mechanisms, for example? What are we most concerned about in terms of toxicological effects? The second was to prioritize the microplastic characteristics of greatest biological concern. So do we care most about shape, size, polymer composition, weathering, functional groups? What is it that's driving the toxicity that we might be seeing? And then finally, identifying health-based thresholds for microplastics. So on the human health effects side, just to summarize very briefly, if I can successfully, the basic upshot is that the mammalian toxicity data is very limited. This is changing, but especially at the time of this workshop, we were grabbing every mammalian related study that we possibly could, and we're working with what we had, but we were able to deduce that it's very likely that particle size is playing a key role in toxicity. And there is a consistent trend in health effects pointing to inflammation and oxidative stress. Because of the limitations in the amount of available data, we were able to derive a conservative screening level to inform monitoring, but it wasn't possible to do a full-blown health-based threshold. So we're really anxious to watch the field improve and get more of that data that we need for threshold development. But this is where we left off on the human health effects side of things. So on the aquatic organism side, again, just to very quickly summarize, there was a lot more data to work with. The issue was that some of it was not necessarily fit for purpose for what we were trying to do, but I'll get into that in a minute. But what we really found is that food dilution and oxidative stress and inflammation following translocation are really the most relevant effects based on the current evidence that we had at the time, back in 2020, 2021. Particle size, again, is likely to play a key role in toxicity. So for example, in something like translocation, it's really those smaller particles that are less than 100 microns that are probably the most likely ones to translocate into those other tissues. The really big thing that we were able to achieve as part of this workshop was a framework and analytical process from which to derive thresholds. But even though we were able to come up with numbers, it's really important to acknowledge that these thresholds are not perfect by any means, because as I mentioned earlier, a lot of the available data that we had was not necessarily fit for purpose, specifically for threshold development. In particular, there was a real lack of dose response data, which is really what we need for our framework to work and to get really nice, reliable thresholds. But we have the framework and analytical process to do that. So now it's just a matter of getting that data to roll in. So the big outcomes from the health effects workshop was that we were able to help inform the OPC, the Ocean Protection Council's microplastic strategy, which was adopted early last year, which was really, really, really exciting, fulfilling one of those mandates of Senate Bill 1263. Another big outcome of this is that we have really specific research recommendations for how to fill those data gaps that we were finding as part of this process to improve hazard characterization and threshold development. And all of this is published in a special issue of Microplastics and Nanoplastics. So that's kind of what which I'll go over each of these. And then we're looking now, we've done laboratory methods. We're really interested in the field collection methods. So how do you go out there and actually collect a sample? And then ToMEx 2.0. So I'll go through each of these really quickly. So the Bight Regional Monitoring Program is a monitoring program that SWRCB has been coordinating since 1994. So this has been going on for a really long time. It's integrated, coordinated monitoring with not just SWRCB, but many other parties to answer basic questions about environmental status and trends that are really not captured in any other way in Southern California. We focus on current management needs and documents of success for management actions. So just kind of, what does the Bight look like right now? But it also has this opportunity to explore new problems and document the success of previous management actions. So for certain pollutants, we can kind of take a look back over this time course data and see if things are getting better or worse based on different management actions we might have taken. So for Bight this year, we assess so many things as part of Bight. And we have been doing the 90s. And we've been doing this in marine trawls and in inland streams. We're in the early stages of the planning process right now. And we're really excited to start to maybe incorporate these macro debris assessments into estuaries and wetlands, which is really exciting. And the really exciting thing, I think, for this group is that we're also in the works of incorporating microplastics into the Bight program. So this would be the first time that Bight actually does an assessment of microplastics, if we can pull this off. And right now, like I said, we're deep in the planning process, but our matrices of interest are really sediment and shellfish, given the sampling opportunities that we can leverage. And we're really interested in those nearshore habitats as kind of this first pass, since that's where most of the human activity is, that's where most of the trash is, that's probably where most of the microplastics are. And sample collection will begin this summer. So like I said, very early stages of the planning process, but we're really excited about this. So stay tuned. And then the next effort that is kind of in the works is an evaluation of field collection methods. So like I said before, we did the laboratory side of things. Now, if we're going to go out and we're going to start doing this large scale monitoring for microplastics in programs such as the Bight, we want to make sure that we're collecting our samples in a standardized way that's going to make sense for the type of information that we want to get. So at this point, I'm sure that many of you know that sample collection methods have not really been evaluated or standardized. And if you see here, this figure on the right, this is actually a paper that Scott led as part of the health effects workshop. And basically, Scott, you can jump in if I don't explain this super quickly or correctly, but basically what he did was he looked at the difference between the samples that were collected using a manta trawl and the samples that were collected using grab samples. The grab samples were, intended to get those smaller particles and fibers that might slip through the manta trawl net, and to try to correct and harmonize those two data sets. And really, what I want you to pay attention to is the bottom of this figure. That's all the alignments and corrections, and see that there's a huge amount of uncertainty when you try to correct for this between these two different sample collection methods. So this is just an example of why it's so important to standardize this, because we've been able to learn a lot from this really great study that was done in the Bay. So this is one of our next big efforts that we want to tackle. And in terms of the matrices that we're interested in, as part of this evaluation would be for ambient water. So this would include surface water and potentially the water column, sediment, biota, and stormwater. So this is going to be a massive project that we're really excited about. We're again in the early planning stages. And this would be funded by partially the OPC and the State Water Board. So really excited about this. And then the final thing that I want to share with you guys is the Toxicity of Microplastics Explorer. So if you haven't heard about the Toxicity of Microplastics Explorer, it's a database for microplastics toxicity with an accompanying our Shiny app. And it was created to support the Microplastics Health Effects Workshop. And it includes data all the way through essentially the end of 2020 for the most part, since that's when the Health Effects Workshop was going on. But this tool is really powerful, and it's such a great database that we really want to keep it alive. And it needs an update so that we can continue to use it. And so our next big event is ToMEx 2.0, which will be a virtual 4-part work group series to crowdsource the data mining and validation needed to keep ToMEx up to date. Our kickoff meeting is on Valentine's Day, which should be a really easy day to remember. It'll be from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. on that day. And I will drop a link in the chat. Actually, I'll drop many links in the chat for all of the things that I've been mentioning throughout this talk for registering for this kickoff meeting. But we'll explain kind of the process and the goals of the work group during this kickoff. But one of the things I want to point out is that there's many benefits to participating, particularly for students. So if you have students working under you that are just getting into this field, I think this would be a really great opportunity for them to learn the literature, to collaborate with peers. There'll be publication opportunities if you meet the expectations of the work group. And then you'll also get early access to ToMEx 2.0. So if you're interested, definitely register for the kickoff meeting. I think it's going to be a lot of fun and really cool to see how the data has changed in just 2 years with ToMEx 2.0. And that is all I have. And hopefully I didn't take up too much of the time. And hopefully if I cut off, I saw a couple of times my internet connection was unstable. Hopefully I didn't freeze too much, but I'd be happy to go back and repeat anything or answer any questions that anyone might have.
Thanks so much, Leah. Yeah, I think the interruptions with the internet, they weren't critical, at least for me.
Okay, good.
And I helped you out, put some links in the chat for some of the things that you're discussing along the way. Does anyone have any questions? Feel free to just unmute and speak up.
Sure, I'll ask a question. I was wondering with some of these sort of the field collection methods comparison, or maybe the Bight regional monitoring, are there ways to get involved in those from the community as a whole? I know ToMEx is, you're having that wonderful, easy opportunity for us to engage in that. But what about these other opportunities? Are there ways people can get involved, and how would they do that?
Yes, so Bight is a really cool program in that it's completely collaborative.
Oh no. Leah, you might have to.
So it's basically we are all us and all the participants of Bight, but anyone can get involved. Oh no, okay.
Yeah, we lost you for a good 15 seconds there. I would say if we could just continue to the Q&A in the chat.
I think that's a great idea.
Involved in Bight, Monica, email me.
I would recommend possibly, Leah, you have some excellent information to share. Maybe you turn off your camera and see if that helps. Because
does that help?
Yeah, you're coming through.
Great suggestion.
Want to repeat what you just said if we have time? Just
what I was going to tell you, Monica, is if you're
I think it cuts out every time you're about to say something super important. So let's just do it over in the chat. Okay.
It sounds like she's gonna leave and rejoin, but when she comes back, we'll just handle the Q&A over chat. I saw Ben Maurer also had a good question for her. Didn't miss that, so I'll make sure we get that. For our next speaker, we've got Dr. Wynn Cowger from the Moore Institute for Plastic Pollution Research, who's just returned from a fruitful 3-month expedition in Germany. And he's going to give us an exciting update about what he's doing with OpenSpeccy. Let me make sure that you have
screen share access.
Yeah. There you go. You should be able to screen share now, Wynn.
Okay. Yeah, Scott called it an expedition because I was out here in Helgoland, Germany, which is like a 2-hour boat ride off of the North German coastline here in the North Sea. It's a tiny little island, 1 mile square, and they have the most cutting edge research facilities for doing spectroscopy on microplastics there with Sebastian Primke and Gunnar Gertz's group. So anyways, yeah, it was great. I spent 3 months and there working on OpenSpeccy and open spectroscopy data sets, and I'll be talking about that. So I'll show my screen here. And I just want to start out by thanking all of the people who make this possible, especially my funders from National Renewable Energy Lab, the Helmholtz Information and Data Science Academy. Actually funded the 3 months out there. So if you want to do something similar, reach out to Sebastian Primke because there are more opportunities for people from the US to go out there and do this work, as well as the Possibility Lab, who's funded a lot of this too. So really the motivation for developing these new spectroscopy data sets comes from the industry today, who is trying to catch up to the ever-expanding needs of the microplastics research. So this is an excerpt from Wiley's group. They have the currently largest spectroscopy library available. And they wrote this document as they were adding in new microplastic spectra and said that, however, it's not easy to collect samples to make reliable reference spectral databases for unknown comparison. And I totally agree with them. And then I was very flattered with the fact that they took OpenSpeccy and they used it as their reference library to validate their updates against. So now the commercial labs are using our open source software to make sure that those are working correctly. So that's like a huge change in the field. And this one just gets me really excited and keeps me moving forward to make more and more open stuff. So really brief outline. I'm going to talk about high throughput FTIR analysis for micro and large macro plastics with plate readers, developing an advanced database for data analysis and high throughput techniques, and then an update to OpenSpeccy. So this device is called a HTX FTIR plate reader. It's from Brooker. You basically have 96 well plates. You can put microplastic particles. We put down to about 500 microns in size in here into these plates. And then you just load the plate reader and it goes and collects a really high quality reflectance or transmission spectra of the particles. It also has an ATR unit. So basically we took 700 different plastic and non-plastic particles through all of these techniques to develop a reference library. And we tried to validate this spectra using OpenSpeccy, OpenSpeccy's out-of-the-box accuracy. So basically, after we collected all the spectra, we tried to ID it in OpenSpeccy. With ATR, we got about 50% accuracy, just out of the box, like not fine tuning anything, just taking the first hit. It's kind of like the worst case accuracy you could imagine. Then with reflectance, we see much lower, I mean, like a quarter of that. And with transmission, it's around the same. So what does this mean? This means that we really do have an issue with the current spectral libraries. And this isn't just OpenSpecky's problem. The vast majority of spectral libraries out there only have ATR spectra. And so you could expect that they are going to perform really well with ATR spectra and not very good with reflectance or transmission spectra. I hope that the work that we've done to collect this big database that we're going to share with everybody is going to get us to a place where the reflectance and transmission spectra are just as good as the ATR spectra, but we may still have even more work to do after this even. And one of the reasons I think that OpenSpecky performs poorly and other databases likely perform poorly is that they have really low hit qualities for reflectance and transmission. So this line here is a 0.7 Pearson correlation. This is typically a threshold that people use for saying everything below that, if it's a hit below that, then we don't know what it is, basically. And you can see that these are box plots of the typical Pearson correlation for all the reflectance and transmission measurements. You see ATR is way up here for most of them, and then reflectance and transmission are way down here. So adding in these new reference spectra should really push those boxes up. And this is kind of shifting gears here a little bit. So this is another large database collection technique that we're developing at the Moore Institute, where we've been taking FTIR hyperspectral maps with an array. So this is basically, you can see all these little particles here. I can't remember what, I think they're PET particles. And we can take a map of a bunch of PET particles, but then what we want is we want to extract just the spectra from the PET particles so that we can add them to a reference library. And we developed this new signal times noise thresholding technique where you can basically take the signal values, which is like the mean intensity, and then multiply that by the noise, which is like the standard deviation of all the intensities. And if you plot that in a histogram, you get the most magical histogram you could imagine. It's called a bimodal distribution. And whenever you see one of those, you know that you have two groups that you can separate using thresholding. So with this one, we can draw a line here, and then everything above that is a particle. Everything below that is the background. And what do we get? We get perfect or near perfect extraction of all of the pixels that have the particle spectra in them. And if you don't believe me, I can show you some examples of the background spectra versus the particle spectra that we extracted here, just for an example. You can see really clearly these are actual particle spectra, whereas this has no signal. That's just a gold slide on the background. And what this means is that now with this technique, in 1 hour, we could create a reference database of 10,000 spectra, which is currently the size of any commercial spectral library that you would buy today. So it's a really big advance and pretty exciting. And I think collecting reference spectra in this way is really going to help speed up and improve analysis of hyperspectral maps, which is really the future of what we want to be doing with microplastics analysis. Okay, so let's add on like one more layer to this. So when you have this like signal noise thresholding thing that can find all the particles, but what are the particles? So we've been developing this AI classification technique to try to ID the particles. But one of the issues with AI classification is that, at least the AIs that we're currently using, is that it IDs the background as different things. And so how do we overcome that? Well, we just kind of overlay the signal times noise thresholding with the AI classification. And basically we're able to know where the background is. And then we can ID all the particles using that by overlaying those two. So I think that's kind of where the future is going. And we are developing a new OpenSpecky UI to integrate all of these nice advancements that we've made. Here in the new OpenSpec UI, you're going to have a map. So there's a particle here. It'll tell you how good the signal is, how good the hits are. You'll have a way that you can kind of query through and see some of the best top hits for every single pixel in the spectral map. And it's made with a new UI framework that's going to be a lot more robust into the future and going to speed up a lot of our web analysis. And then we're also making a software package for OpenSpec. Well, we have a software package already in our package, but we are advancing that package by developing these, what I'm calling monolithic functions, basically one function that does a bunch of things so that you can just kind of grab a Swiss Army knife of a function and say, I want to process my spectra, and here's the 10 things you might want to do to that. And you can just fine tune them all without having to like figure out how to patch everything together yourself. You can use this one function that links everything together in a good way. So that is being updated right now, and that's all I have currently. We're looking for collaborators on all of these projects. Always OpenSpec is an open source collaboration. We currently have about 20 collaborators around the world, but always looking for more folks who are interested in taking spectroscopy of microplastics to the next step. So thanks a lot.
That's super exciting. Thanks so much, Wen, for giving us that update. Does anyone have any questions about that? It might have been a deep dive for folks that are not in the laboratory using these sort of instruments. So I want to just provide like a little bit of background for those that are not doing spectroscopy on a daily basis or at all. Basically, if you're we've got a question from Teresa. Yeah, go ahead and unmute actually, but real quick. If you're running spectroscopy in your laboratory, typically you use either a commercial database for spectra, or a database that you've created yourself. And usually neither of those are ideal. And the idea about OpenSpec is if everyone's going to be creating their own databases, we might as well be sharing them. And that's sort of what it's built off of. So yeah, Teresa, go ahead and unmute, ask your question.
Hi, Scott. Yeah, this is Terry. Thanks for that clarification. And so my question is related to sharing the databases across different technologies. So if an FTIR or a high throughput FTIR or an LDIR or any other type of IR database is developed, is it applicable to all the different technologies?
That's a really good question. I think so far what I've seen is that the mode of the spectral collection tends to be the most important thing for differences between the spectra. So for example, if I took an ATR spectrum and then you took an ATR spectrum on your device somewhere else, different manufacturer and everything, those spectra are pretty similar. But if I took an ATR spectrum and you took a high throughput map with a focal plane array, those spectra would be quite different. So I think that we at least need to collect reference data with different spectral collection modes in mind, but I don't think we necessarily need to collect them on every single device out there. With that said, LDIR, I don't know a ton about it. Honestly, we may need to collect a special reference database just for that. That mode could be very different. I know that the way that the light hits the particle is very different than with the other measurement techniques. So it's worth looking into.
Thank you for the explanation. I think it's going to be something that we could look into later to do some type of comparison to see how applicable it is from technology to technology.
Yeah. I would be really interested in collaborating on that too. And all this data is going to be open. And if you want to use it, tomorrow, I would share it with you. So.
Yeah, it's going to be a while. Thank you.
Yeah.
Before we're ready.
Thanks. Okay. Yeah, Violet.
Yeah, thanks, Wynn. This is awesome, really awesome update. It's so exciting to see how much you've accomplished in such a little time. My question to you is, I think we talked about this at some point in the past, but I can't remember where we're at. Is OpenSpeccy at a place now where you can download the database and upload it into the commercial platforms like the Thermo Fisher, OmnicPicta?
Yeah, I'm about to finish
Oh, okay.
finish that today, actually.
Oh, no way. Okay.
Yeah, and so OmnicPicta has a special file format that's a commercial file format. Basically, I have to like clump at a time, upload it into Omnic and aggregate that library. It's been taking me like 2 days straight to do it, but I'm gonna have like one file soon. And then I can totally share that with you. I was actually thinking about getting in touch with you and probably Monica too, because I think y'all could, and anyone else who's interested in this, is it basically would be like one file. Here's all the data for OpenSpeccy. You can use it. And it would, yeah. Hariba, I don't know. I'm not sure what their file format is or how tricky it is to get the data into that format. I saw a comment come into the chat, but all of the data is open in like a CSV format. So you should be able to, like, if you need to work it into something else, it should be as easy as it could possibly be for you, besides me giving you like the actual end data set result.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, I look forward to that. We'd be happy to test that out. And we're still moving slow, but our goal is, as we're developing our own, or sort of doing our own training and testing and developing our own internal reference libraries, is to still upload those to OpenSpeccy and then, continuously like download the updated copy to our own instrument library. So that would be awesome. Thank you, Wynn.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
All right, it doesn't look like we have any other questions, but as always, feel free to ask them in the chat for moving forward. So we're going to move on to our next presenter, which is Christopher Hand from the State Water Resources Control Board's Environmental Laboratory Accreditation Program, also known as ELAP. And as I mentioned before, ELAP is providing accreditation for microplastics in drinking water. And Chris is just going to give you a little bit of an overview of how that might work for folks that are unfamiliar or just want to learn a little bit more.
Yeah, thanks, Scott. I don't have any fancy slides, and I also have been having connection issues on and off all morning. So if I'm stuttering or anything, please let me know. I'll switch off the camera to hopefully save some bandwidth. But for those who are unaware, I am Christopher Hand. I'm part of the Environmental Laboratory Accreditation Program here at the State Water Board. We offer accreditation services to 20 different agencies and a whole host of other water board programs for a variety of matrices, from drinking water to the weirdest goop sludge for hazardous wastes. We offer microplastics. We have the two methods that were talked about and developed at SWRCB. Those are using Raman and FTIR. We slot them into our process as much as we possibly can. So part of the requirements are the laboratory's got to submit an application package to ELAP to obtain that accreditation. One of those components is an on-site assessment where an assessor reviews the laboratory's procedures against that one of those two reference methods. We have some interest in from laboratories in California, as well as outside of California. For those folks that are in California, it's a little bit easier. ELAP is the primary accreditation body. You can contract directly with ELAP to get your assessment completed, because the way our regulations are defined, it's very interesting, but that's a discussion for a different time. But we also had, as part of our onboarding of this method, we brought in 3 third-party assessment agencies that work across the US and across the globe. Those are A2LA, ANAB, and also Perry Johnson, PJLA. Those are some of the bigger names in the laboratory industry. They offer accreditation for a variety of different things, for international standards and things like that. And so there's been at least one assessor in each of those bodies that has been trained to these SWRCB methods and has a familiarity with how the methods work. So that's the major time-consuming component of obtaining ELAP accreditation, but by far the most time goes in before the laboratory is even ready to get the assessment. I've seen a couple labs struggle with getting their systems clean. Microplastics, it turns out, are everywhere. So they're in the air, they're in the water sometimes. So keeping that system clean seems to be the largest hurdle that I've heard of for laboratories that are trying to onboard and produce this test in-house. Typically, ELAP accreditation requires a positive control sample that's unknown to the laboratory and then is tested in-house. Well, those don't exist yet. Microplastics is on the cutting edge. So as part of our application package, we're probably going to be asking for some sort of data related to laboratory created controls. There are like chemosphere and what I think they're called chemospheres. I can't remember. There's a couple different manufacturers that create perfectly round and colored spheres of plastic that can be used at the laboratory. It's not a great solution. You know, we'll want something better in the future, but for at least internal controls, using those little lab developed things is going to work in terms of getting laboratories on board at the beginning. Once it moves forward and we get some reference standards and, you know, environmentally degraded and more challenging samples that are referenceable, then we'll move towards that. But right at this point, we're just looking for, does the laboratory have the capability to establish their own kind of procedures? So those are the two main parts of ELAP accreditation. There's an application package. I like to think those are pretty self-explanatory, but it's a big checklist of paperwork that you fill out. The laboratory's got to have a quality system in place that they're running and is compliant with our standards. But a lot of that is fleshed out and reviewed during the on-site assessment, which is going to be the major component for ELAP accreditation for this analysis. So we have those two methods. They're located in an interesting spot on our website for those folks who haven't seen. You can search California ELAP, it'll show up as the first result. And if you go to the apply accreditation in our field of accreditation tables, I have a collection of a variety of different things. They're put into table 102, which is inorganic chemistry of drinking water. Not really a chemistry analysis. FTIR and ramen aren't really used for anything else, at least anything that we offer. But they're fitting within the existing system in an okay fashion. Right? They're a bit unique. And there'll be some challenges that we'll identify along the way. But for now, that's where they're going to reside. We're also open to any questions. If anyone's got any questions to us, our general email box is elapca@waterboards.ca.gov. You can email them. They'll usually route the message to me. You can also email me directly, christopher.hand@waterboards.ca.gov. If you've got any specific questions for microplastics and how accreditation would fit into that bucket. But happy to take any questions here now. But other than that, that's all I have for an update.
Thank you, Christopher. I just have a really quick question. You mentioned that there's a couple laboratories that have already reached out to you that are likely going to apply for accreditation. Do you know offhand, like, about how many of those are?
I've heard from 3 myself.
Okay.
So I know there are 4 at this point, but at what point in the stages they are, I couldn't tell you. You know, there's a lot of work that goes to setting up that laboratory ahead of time, and that is what we're finding out is the largest hurdle at this point. So it's not that unusual, you know, if you're bringing on any other specialty equipment like PFAS and things like that. There's a steep learning curve with those too. So that's kind of the point where everyone is at right now.
And then you'd also mentioned that the laboratories don't have to be in California, and actually they can be in any country. Are there any other restrictions that we might know about, or lack of restriction that we might assume, like can an academic lab become accredited?
Yeah, absolutely. An academic lab could become accredited. If you're not physically located inside California, it's a little bit more difficult. For sake of ease of everyone here, I won't go into the extra difficulties. Feel free to email me and I'll walk them through with folks individually. But it's not impossible. We've got laboratories across the US. We have laboratories in Canada, and there was one in a different place, and I don't recall where it is off the top of my head, but we got laboratories all over the United States for sure.
And then if I was looking for a laboratory to do microplastics analysis, is there a way through ELAP that I can search for that?
Not at the moment, because there aren't any. Once we get some laboratories that are here, my suspicion is the Division of Drinking Water is going to be posting a specific list, similar to how the list is posted for PFAS analysis at the moment. The top hot topic will have a separate list, so it's more easily searchable for folks needing that analysis done. So,
very good. Does anyone else have any questions?
Hi, Scott, it's Terry again. Yeah, I do have a couple of questions. Chris, thank you for your information. Metropolitan Laboratories just recently had our main compliance laboratory audited. We had the first under TNI under the new regulations. It was great. A lot of work, man. It was a lot of work. But anyway, the third party assessor was very helpful. Curious about, and this is a question, so I have a few questions. The first one is, do you have a checklist for the laboratory audit for the two methods?
I'll have to get back to you on that. We have a checklist based on old methods, and I can't, the previous version, which is a few things that got tweaked between version 1.0 and 1.1, which is the one we're offering. And I'll have to double check and get back to you on if that is updated at this point.
Okay, good. And regarding, it's laboratory contamination and sample contamination, microplastics are in the air. So yeah, we do get sample contamination during processing and analysis. At least we haven't done it in our lab yet, but we're trying to mitigate it so that we minimize it. The question I have is regarding, this is going to be an ongoing problem for laboratories. How do we correct for that? Or just knowing that the sample contamination is going to happen, is there a way that we could still pass an ELAP audit, get accredited, and still have this like minimum allowable level of sample contamination? I know that's a ridiculous question, but I thought I'd ask.
It's a totally valid question. The methods that we offer right now have, I believe, two different ways of detecting what the laboratory's blank contamination is. There's a plate count that you would leave out in the air just to see how long or how much contamination is present from air, and then you're running your blank samples. So if you're doing any filtration or doing any kind of analysis like that, just to make sure that you're not picking up anything there. There isn't, from my understanding, and Scott may correct me if I'm wrong here, but there isn't right now a threshold that the laboratory must meet, because at this point, we're still kind of in the investigative of like, okay, well, there's gonna be some contamination. You're not gonna be able to remove all of it. As long as the laboratory has procedures in place to mitigate that contamination. One of the examples that Square was showing was everyone's got cotton lab coats over in the microplastics lab. And they were toying with the idea of dyeing them all hot pink, so that way you could see exactly contamination coming from your lab coats. So something to that effect, right? The laboratory's got to have procedure and policy and processes in place to mitigate that contamination, and then also be reporting what the contamination is, what kind of level, and if you're detecting samples above that, right? So.
Thanks, Chris. Okay, so this next question is for Scott. Okay, as laboratories begin to, and utility laboratories in this case, but any laboratory, is there any way that sample results could be submitted for a monitoring order that from a laboratory officially that are not from an accredited laboratory?
Not for regulatory monitoring. It'll need to be an accredited laboratory. But if it's for non-regulatory monitoring, it really depends on where the sample is being taken. If it's a drinking water sample, I don't believe there's a way to upload it anywhere currently to the state websites. But if it's a surface water sample, that can go in SWAMP, the SWAMP's database, and I don't believe it needs to be an accredited laboratory. But someone on this call might know better and can correct me.
Okay, so then the clarification next would be, are monitoring orders regulatory compliance? So when you're submitting data to them, is it considered a compliance sample?
Effectively, yes. However, it doesn't need to be at, well, it will need to be at the point specified in the order. So effectively, that is the compliance point of monitoring. And it would need to fulfill the compliance, which would just be submit the data on a quarterly basis in compliance with the order. There's no notification level or response level, so it doesn't need to meet any of those parameters. But effectively, yes. Did that get at the question you're asking?
Yes, thank you. It helps clarify it. I think I look forward to future discussions about this, and what type of flexibility we might have, because until we deal with this contamination issue, it's going to be, potentially problematic for labs to get accredited. So, and we want to get the data. So I'm just curious. Maybe we'll take this offline. Thank you, Scott.
Yeah, thank you, Terry. And these are great observations, and I'm glad that we have this forum to talk about these challenges, as this is really what this is about, working on them together. So we've got our next speaker, Kaitlyn Kalua from the Ocean Protection Council, is going to give us an update on what's going on with the OPC, their method development, and some RFPs. So take it away, Kaitlyn.
All right, apologies as I'm getting into the actual presentation mode. There we are. Excuse me as I move. Okay, apologies. I've got multiple things happening on my screen. Are you in presentation mode?
We're seeing the non-presentation mode.
Thank you. Okay. I apologize. I've gotten used to Teams and what are you seeing at this stage? Okay.
Same thing.
Okay, apologies.
Oh, there we go.
All right, well, we're gonna move on. So just a brief update for everyone. My name is Kaitlyn Kalua. I'm the Water Quality Program Manager with the California Ocean Protection Council, which OPC, the California Ocean Protection Council, is a cabinet level state policy body within the within the California Natural Resources Agency, and is generally guided by its strategic plan to protect California's coast and ocean. Specifically, our work related to plastics is guided in large part by Objective 3 of the OPC strategic plan, that is to enhance and protect marine biodiversity including the following targets to achieve zero trash entering state waters by 2030, consistent with the State Water Resource Control Board's trash amendments, as well as advancing the development of plastic pollution monitoring data, as well as standardized methods. And then, of course, developing and implementing the statewide microplastic strategy. So for those that are not familiar with the statewide microplastic strategy, this was developed, as Leah described earlier in this meeting, as directed by Senate Bill 1263. It was adopted by the California legislature in 2018 and adopted by the OPC this past February of last year. Essentially has two simultaneous tracks to both simultaneously advance early source reduction and additional solutions to reduce plastic pollution in the environment, acknowledging that microplastics do fragment from larger plastic pollution. So it is comprehensive in that way, while simultaneously advancing a research strategy to understand both occurrence and risk thresholds and evaluating new recommendations for the legislature by December 30th of 2025, as outlined in the statute. Just flagging for this group, this is the second track of the strategy, which outlines a iterative research approach to advance monitoring, to then inform risk thresholds and assessment, to prioritize then our priority sources and pathways of microplastic contamination, again, evaluating new solutions as we gain more data. On this slide, it also demonstrates where there's overlap between this strategy and existing ocean litter strategy goals that are co-managed or co-facilitated between the California Ocean Protection Council, as well as NOAA Marine Debris Program. And so there is overlap. These are existing goals in a large way, as far as it's not necessarily reinventing the wheel. These are needed research, early identified research needs. That said, where we are now is in 2022, California did adopt the microplastics, statewide microplastic strategy, as well as one of the first extended producer responsibility laws regarding comprehensive plastic source reduction in the nation, that is Senate Bill 54. And the strategy does include a series of interim targets and deadlines between 2022 and December 30th of 2025, that is by 2026, to standardize microplastics monitoring methods, to initiate a pilot monitoring program, to investigate sources and pathways, as well as update the risk assessment framework as additional data and thresholds are better refined. For OPC, our priorities going to 2023 really do land in these three categories. That is, one, supporting the development of this monitoring network that is both for macro and microplastics, launching releasing a request for proposals, filling in needed research and data gaps, as well as scoping sector-specific workshops that were identified within the statewide microplastic strategy. That includes targeted sectors of, single-use plastics, it is textiles, agriculture, culture gear, as well as vehicle tire wear. And for today's update is OPC does have its next meeting is January 24th, 2023. On the agenda is agenda item number 7. This is what I'm considering a plastics package. One is the approval of funding to release this competitive call for microplastics research. 2 discrete projects to support the development of this plastics monitoring network that includes the microplastic sample collection method evaluation and standardization that Leah had described earlier in today's meeting, as well as the development of statewide plastics monitoring plan. And then the third is more on the source reduction macro debris, but then to support implementation of the Los Angeles County single-use plastics ordinance. Let's see, so, excuse me. And so for the purposes of today, I do want to share that OPC in partnership with California Sea Grant has developed a research call focusing on largely two separate research calls within the same solicitation. More information on this will be released tomorrow in a staff recommendation on the OPC agenda. So I will, after this presentation, include a link to our listserv so that those that are not receiving OPC updates will be notified when the agenda is posted. The schedule is for tomorrow, and so there'll be more information. But essentially at this stage, we are looking at two large research priorities. One explicitly to improve understanding of both the source contributions of microplastic contamination to inform, with the explicit purpose of informing management action, and then also to expand ecological risk and sensitivity understanding of ecological risk that is specific to dose response, filling in the gaps that were identified by SWRCB and Leah in the workshop findings as well that were described earlier in today's meeting. A second research call is focused more on the interception of microplastics that is within green infrastructure, low impact development, assessing both efficacy, but also to help inform and essentially inform recommendations for effective green infrastructure use for microplastic intervention. I will move. So the anticipated timeline for this research call is first and foremost is our council approval of the disbursement of these research funds. Following that approval, we will then be able to release this RFP that will essentially, excuse me, as I take a step back, these are anticipated to be projects of 2 years in duration. Anticipate up to approximately 8 projects likely through this funding announcement between the 2 research priorities, which will be then described further in solicitation webinars that will provide more information on both. Sorry, Lindsay, you may want to go on mute. Thank you. So there will be solicitation webinars hosted by California Sea Grant in partnership with OPC, as well as the anticipated timeline for submission deadlines, as well as review process with the October 2023 project start date for these 2-year projects. Just one note, OPC did adopt its equity plan this last October of 2022. And with that, California Sea Grant and the Ocean Protection Council are encouraging applicants for this research call to consider diversity, equity, inclusion in your research proposal, whether that be physical evaluation of benefits to a community, engagement with individual communities or impacted user groups as appropriate for the research design, or mentorship opportunities and ways to expand early career development for those entering this field. And so there's a pretty broad application that this can be addressed within the research applications. And so I just do want to flag that we do have a very active commitment. This will be part of the scoring process. Second on our OPC agenda for this month is the development of or advancing of this the plastics generally, excuse me, both macro and microplastics monitoring network. That is the sample collection method evaluation standardization work being pursued by SWRCB and in partnership with the State Water Resources Control Board described earlier today, as well as the development of statewide plastics, that's both macro and microplastics monitoring plan to be initiated in 2023, anticipating how the fairly robust public outreach process through 2023 to inform the development of this plan, either through the Water Quality Monitoring Council presentations during this subcommittee, as well as other outreach opportunities through 2023 for a final plan being published and released in 2025. So that is our anticipated timeline. Lastly, just flagging, it's shifting the gears a little bit from microplastics monitoring to then source reduction policies, and that the Los Angeles County last April adopted a fairly comprehensive, a single-use plastics ordinance that does include recyclable, compostable, and reusable requirements for a variety of food establishments, and it has a phased compliance requirement depending on the type of food entity that is, or food facility, is those that are brick and mortar, more temporary, like fast food restaurants, as well as food trucks, et cetera. So there's this phased compliance requirement through 2023, 2024 that OPC is looking to support implementation of this ordinance as effectively a case study on business resources and providing the technical assistance that's needed to physically comply with these requirements in this phased approach, as well as encouraging the use of reusable materials where possible. And that is my update. With that, I will stop sharing my screen so I can share our listserv link within the chat. Open to any questions.
Wow, that's a lot going on. Thanks for the update, Kaitlyn.
Absolutely.
And if anyone wants to go back and look through the slides in case they've missed something, want to refresh their memory, they will be hosted on the Google Drive link. And it looks like we've got a question from Wind.
Yeah, thanks a lot. It's really great always to see the leadership that OPC has in this space. And one thing that I've been thinking a lot about is, I don't know if you're familiar with the Clean California program being run by the California DOT. Basically, it's like $1 billion project over 3 years to clean up the roads. And they're collecting like millions of pounds, maybe even millions of tons. I can't remember the order. But it just sounds like this insane amount of trash, and they're collecting data on it. And I feel like that data set has got to be really important for California for understanding the problem of trash on roads. But there's been, like, from my understanding, very little clarity on what types of data might be collected, if that data will ever be made available. And I'm wondering if there might be an opportunity for OPC to join that conversation and help us to get that data out there.
No, I sincerely appreciate that, Wynn. I'd say, yes, happy to connect in ways that directly with you and the Moore Institute as far as what's most helpful in that regard. But also, I do want to flag that with the approval of our council for the development of the plan, that is the plastics monitoring plan, that is an opportunity to bring multiple state agencies together. I think it is intended to be this coordinated approach. It is to, both meet our overarching state science needs, information needs, but also leveraging the multiple resources, quite frankly, so that way not everyone's operating in a silo, but that we are addressing our data collection in a very coordinated manner. And that's actually then collecting that data in a way that's then usable as well. So that's a huge, I think, objective and need, within that process. So it is going to have these multiple layers, both within the state for state coordination, but then also on the public sphere as well, as ensuring that we're having this over like very transparent process as far as making sure that we're having this data that's going to be usable. Thank you.
Thanks.
As well as the data management component. I didn't need to flag that for you, Wynn.
Yeah, I would love to. I would love to manage that data. Oh yeah, one other quick one. So I've been noticing a lot of issues with some of the policies that have come through, especially for like foodware, single-use plastic foodware, where like we have a ban on straws, yet like I continue to get handed straws every time I go anywhere and ask for a drink. And I'm wondering if if we need to do research on, on the efficacy of enforcement, even of some of these policies. And I don't know what your feelings are, if that's kind of like I just was wondering what your perspective on somebody doing research like that might be.
That's a great question. And I think it's extremely on point as far as looking at this, both the macro and the microplastic side of this plan development, because there is on the macro plastic side, certainly there's so many different citizen science, as well as you mentioned, research needs, that I think we do need to be looking at tracking the efficacy of these different quote unquote, management solutions or regulations or product prohibitions. And so that can be part, I think, of a monitoring design, is looking at where is that overlap of the existing regulations? What is the plastic sources or those trash that we are seeing within those other communities, waterways, et cetera? And that could be such a beneficial layer and level of analysis, quite frankly. And there is that need for that multi-level layer of tracking. Taking a step back, a large motivation for OPC to be pursuing this network is not only with the statewide microplastic strategy, but really bring it to our council this month so we can initiate this work, is the adoption of Senate Bill 54 last summer. It does include the development of establishment of a plastic pollution mitigation fund within the state of California beginning in 2027, but also then these requirements for single-use plastics, to essentially be phased out, recyclable, compostable, et cetera. And you are going to need to be able to track the efficacy and, quite frankly, as you said, the compliance component of that statewide. And so in order to do that, we need baseline data. And so we can't wait until 2027, to start that work. So that's why we want to start it this year. And that's why, again, this is on our agenda for January 24th.
Sweet, thank you.
Thanks, Kaitlyn. Does anyone else have any questions? Alrighty, hearing none, we're gonna switch gears a little bit and go to our work groups. And our first work group that we're going to hear from is the Sampling and Analytical Methods Playbook from Shelly Walther. I'm just grouping in the shared Zoltero library agenda item in there for those that are confused. So take it away, Shelly.
Thanks, Scott. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And like you said, I think I'm going to just, in the interest of time, just kind of group both of those items that are on the agenda together into one presentation. And I think that'll just help with the flow. I'm going to share my screen. Let's see. There we go. Okay. Okay. Can everyone see this in presentation mode?
Looks good.
Great. So great updates today. It's really helpful. And like Kaitlyn said, it's, I think part of the great thing about this work group as a whole is that we are bringing information together and kind of putting it in a forum and discussions and that can be usable. And overall, we can get this higher level of science and policy in place to help improve things. So with our microplastics sampling and analysis playbook, or MPMP for monitoring, to keep it short, we just as a review, we're going to be putting this playbook out as a living document. So the first iteration, because we have SB 1422 as the most immediate need, we'll be working with Scott and others to make sure that it's meeting their needs, and also just touching in on all of the developments that will be happening this year with sampling and lots of different avenues. And so one part of this is making sure that we're all kind of have access to the information and that we're able to share it in a very kind of efficient and fluent way. So we have some open source libraries that are now available. And the way that, for those of you who aren't familiar with Zoltero, it's a free platform. You can go to zoltero.org and you can search for different libraries or start your own. The trick is the first 300, if you're storing your literature in the database along with your citation, and all you have to do is you can get a browser add-on, and you just basically click a button and it profiles and saves the information all in your database. If you're saving the actual paper, the PDF, it can increase your storage size to the point where if you're amassing thousands and thousands of papers, you're going to run over your 300 megabyte limit, and which happened to me, within a year of getting Zoltero. And so when that happens, you can't sync between different devices and the web beyond that 300 megabytes. And so you can still continue to store, but your devices won't sync. So now we have kind of I'll say, just call it unlimited storage. And so we can add new libraries and share amongst that. Now, the thing with Zoltero is that you, if you want to provide the actual paper, it has to be a closed group versus an open group. And so that means right now I have 2 libraries set up for our work groups, one for the consumer messaging and one for the microplastics monitoring playbook. And because we want to provide the papers, they're set as closed work groups where you'd have to kind of request to be in, and then you'd have access to all of the papers as well as the ability to cite and add information to the library. And the other option is to just, we could either mirror this or have a separate thing if someone wanted to maintain that, of purely open where you didn't have to request to be in it, where it would just have the citations but no actual papers. So those are some options. We can play with the settings, and so we'll be rolling out the links to join these, to request to join in our work group meetings. And it's very exciting to be able to share this because it'll help us when we're putting together our efforts to standardize everything. We'll have a lot of citations, and this will help with management of that, and also just efficient collection. You can literally push a button and it's in your database. So and this will be available wherever you have web browser, or you can have the desktop version and sync it to that. So it should help everyone. And this is just an example of what it could look like. I just put, I have my holdings separate in this library, but I just kind of dragged a couple over into this new, and if you look at group libraries, got the playbook, and I put one here, and you can see it just by the push of the button, it gives you all of the information for the citation, and there's tags. You can see all the tags that it's kind of collected, and so you can search by tag, and you can also set the citation format so that you can, it creates a bibliography for you as you write. It syncs really well with Word or Google Docs, and it's also compatible with R. So there's a lot of things that we can do that to really have truly reproducible reporting. So that's something that we've been really wanting, and I think it'll really help kind of bring our effort to the next level. Going forward with that, the other update is that we have a microplastics monitoring playbook workgroup meeting coming up on February 6th, 2023, and it's from 1 to 2:30. And we'll have Wynn present on the microplastics data portal, Wynn Calgar from the Moore Institute of Plastic Pollution Research. And we'll be talking about the playbook and the first version and the timeline, and getting subcommittees together who want to participate in that. And we'll be focused on drinking water and also all of the elements of sampling and analysis that go along, that are transcend matrix. So lots of stuff to cover, and should be exciting. So save the date, and we'll be putting out that meeting announcement very shortly. But oh, and I was wondering why the slide wasn't looking right. There it is. There's all the information again. And yeah, so during the meeting, we will, I believe, Wynn will be sharing a draft data template with us. And so as part of that work group, we'll actually have comments and able to really review it hands-on, and to give Wynn some hands-on feedback. So that should be really good. Just a reminder of part of the outline and things that we're looking at. And yeah, so please, I hope that especially the drinking water community, a lot of the concerns that were mentioned today, I think that's fantastic information to kind of bring into the playbook, and kind of definitely some questions that we all have about monitoring, research, permit requirements, ELAP, all that stuff will be great to have to cover, and make sure that we're talking together. And that's it. So if any questions or suggestions, feel free, and otherwise turn it back to you, Scott.
Thank you, Shelly. So when we announced the details for that work group meeting, we'll just send it out through the listserv so that nobody misses the opportunity to join if they want to.
Perfect.
Does anyone have any questions for Shelly about the Zoltero libraries or about the playbook work group? I'm really excited for these Zoltero libraries. I really appreciate you getting that resource for our group. I think that's going to be really useful for us all.
Yeah, I'm really excited about that aspect too. It's been something we've wanted for a while, and it's happening. So thanks.
So Shelly, can people request to join now for the Zoltero group?
Yeah, and it's searchable. The slide that I had shown, if you just you know, and I can put a title that maybe you can capture both groups, like CW, California Water Quality Monitoring Council acronym in front of it, so that you can know which microplastics work group. There's probably a lot that you might get a hit on, so something like that might help. Yeah, so we can rename it, put a nice description. I just wanted to show you that it is available, and they're not built out yet, but we have thousands of papers to just drag with a click of a button, and it'll be populated, and we can start tagging things, developing special tags, and really making it a useful tool for our the things we'll be producing.
Awesome, thank you, Shelly. So we're going to move on to our next work group update from Alma from ARCADIS, who'll be providing an update for the consumer messaging work group.
Yes, hi everyone, thanks Scott. Can you see my screen?
There we go, yeah.
Great, so I'll be very brief, couple of slides here. So hi everyone, my name's Alma Beciragic, co-lead of the consumer messaging work group alongside Brent Alsbach and Teresa Slifko. So over the next couple minutes, I'll just be providing a quick update on what the group has been up to, what direction we're moving in, as well as using this as an opportunity for recruiting. We're always looking for additional support. So I did want to start off with a quick refresher of what the consumer messaging work group's goals are, particularly for folks who might not have been with us at the larger group meeting back in September, and then go into discussing our approach to tackling some of those goals, as well as highlighting specific areas that we're looking for help on. So the first goal is to develop language for utilities to use in consumer confidence reports, which is particularly relevant for California, where utilities will be sampling, and potentially other states as well around the country that'll either sample voluntarily or by decree. The second of the two-pronged goals is to develop additional context for utility reference, supplemental information that might be useful for utilities to include in their CCR if they choose to do that, and just really create a foundation, a resource that utilities can use in preparation to fulfill some of these CCR language needs. So I will jump into here quickly just our approach to those aforementioned goals. So at our last meeting, we talked about developing a series of topical paragraphs as options for CCR inclusion, and those paragraphs will be very brief, not more than roughly 80 words, avoiding demonstrative statements, and using accessible and clear language. And the topic areas around which those paragraphs will be developed are listed here. So sources, where do microplastics come from? What is their origin? Occurrence in water supplies, treatment, how effective are various treatments, conventional or otherwise, at removing or reducing microplastic concentrations, health effects, management, the we hear you, what are we doing about it type language, and finally, a paragraph summarizing the California State Monitoring Program. So for the health effects language, that would be an alternative. The vision is for it to be an alternative to the state-generated language, which we see presented here on the slide, although likely similar in scope and length. So currently we have openings in all 6 areas for volunteers. The green highlighted boxes here are already assigned, and then we're looking, the pink boxes, we're looking for volunteers to step up and work in groups of 2 with the consumer messaging work group to put those draft language paragraphs, those draft paragraphs together, and then share them again with the team and get feedback, refine those, and have those really ready for utilities to use. And of course, these teams can be expanded to more than 2 based on what driven by folks' interests. My email address is here at the end, the bottom of this slide. So if this is something that resonates with you, if you do want to contribute to the effort to really equip utilities with this kind of material, please do reach out or drop your email address in the chat of this call, and then I'll be happy to reach out. And with that, if there's any questions, thoughts, anyone from the CMW group, if there's something that I failed to mention, please do.
Thanks, Alma. And as Terry mentioned in the chat, we are looking for helpers for this. If anyone is interested in this, please email Alma, Brent, or Terry.
Thanks, Scott. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for putting your email address in. All righty. Does anyone have any questions? Well, hearing none. We have on the agenda open discussion right now. So if there's any other comments or announcements that people want to make, feel free. Just unmute yourself, go for it. Anything related to microplastics or plastic pollution or data or anything like that.
I actually had something I was thinking about when Wynn was presenting, and I love the information you brought about, I'm always looking to characterize results and really get that the accuracy and uncertainty kind of bounded. Did you look at precision as well? When repeated measurements and were they tracking or
yeah, good question. So we did look at that. We did do repeated measurements on the 96 well plates. It's actually really easy to do because we can just set it up to do however many repeats as we want. Actually getting like a metric for repeated measurements is kind of tricky. It's like standard deviation of spectral intensities or something like I like trying to wrap my head around what the best unit is to use for that. Maybe you have some ideas. But honestly, I found that there's like a really wide variety. I didn't see any of the techniques having more or less repeatability. Like ATR, for example, cannot be repeatable for particles that are very non-flat. So if you have like really kind of blocky particles, you get really all over the place signals. Or if you have slightly different materials on different sides of the particles, you start to get different spectra. But with the like transmission, for example, you're measuring the signal of the entire particle. So, you maybe don't get as much of those kind of effects, but if the particle moves slightly, you might get a different, if it's like slightly oriented differently, then you might get a different signal. So yeah, this is just some of my thoughts on that right now.
Sorry, I'm going to drop the precision paper in our new Zoltero library. So I'll share that with you. There's a precision estimate paper that California's Department of Health, Jeff Wagner and Bill Robertson and Harry Allen co-authored, looking at a lot of different methods and repeated measurements and looking at the precision estimates. And the take home is that one scan is not very precise, and so you have to do multiple scans, get that precision estimate, which they explain how to get. Then after that, you don't have to do it 6 or 7 times. You can do it just twice, as long as you're using the same instrument, same technician, that kind of thing. And I'll just, Jack has his hand up. Maybe we can move over to Jack.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to say hello, everybody. My name is Jack Steinman. I work with the County of San Mateo in the Office of Sustainability. And one of the projects that the county is tasked with, and really all jurisdictions across the state, is procuring and applying real massive amounts of compost each year. So I just became aware of this group, so I'm a little disconnected, but I would love to hear if anyone has resources to measure microplastics in compost, or ideas around that. So I'm just throwing that out there. If folks have resources they'd like to share, I would be happy to receive them. I'll put my email in the chat.
Hey, Jack, I'll gladly get in contact with you. I'm actually at WRF just funded a new study looking at biosolids, the biosolids treatment train, including compost. My agency will be participating in it. I'm kind of in charge of the methods. So, and it's going to be big. And right now we have the statewide POTW study funded by the Ocean Protection Council. They are looking at biosolids, which would be similar method for compost. So it's some really exciting work on that. So let's connect and put all those dots together. Something I'm working on too.
That'd be excellent. Thank you, Shelly.
Jack, just off the top of my head, Roland Geyer at UC Santa Barbara has been working with microplastics and compost, but I don't know if they've done any monitoring yet. I know they did basically a estimate study to see how much is going into compost and biosolids, but that might be a good lead for you. And then I think Wayne has been working with some people that have been doing that too.
Yeah, our group is really interested in looking at microplastics in compost. Actually, our founder, Charles Moore, also founded an organic garden group, and they do a ton of composting and are very concerned about microplastics in their compost. So we've been trying to get some projects off the ground with that, and yeah, we'd be interested in collaborating on stuff related to that.
Sounds like we need a subgroup of the microplastics monitoring playbook group could focus on matrices or topics of interest, and that would definitely be a big one.
The other lab that comes to mind is Professor Sanjay Mohanty from UCLA. He's doing a lot with microplastics in agricultural settings, and Wynn's been working with them too.
Yeah, the University of Pacific lab is the one that's doing the analyses for the statewide POTW microplastic study for the biosolids. So they're using the ASTM pyrolysis GCMS method. And so I'm looking forward to hearing more about that specifically for biosolids and compost.
Hi everyone, I'm Julia from Eurofins in Australia, and we've also sort of ventured into biosolids and had a couple of biochars. And currently we're actually working with the EPA in New South Wales to do a study. Obviously they want to regulate PFAS in biosolids. So they had a thought on tagging on microplastics too. So it's definitely a hot topic here in Australia too. And we do have a couple of samples. It's not our bulk samples we do get, but we do, did get some last year.
Thanks, Julia, and it's great to hear from all the way in Australia.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you all. I've been Googling all these recommendations, so I think that'll be a good start, and I may be reaching out to some of you too. Thank you.
Yeah, really appreciate you coming to the meeting, Jack, and for asking that question. Let us know how it goes.
I will do.
One comment. Hi, Charles Moore. Thanks for the mention about the composting and community gardens. The purpose of composting is to create soil. The end product of compost is soil itself. So we have to start thinking about, soil and plastics in soil, because as we amend soil with our compost, which is what we want to do, we're creating new soil. So one of the projects we had with the community gardens was to look at plastics in their soil and see, relate that to the composting protocol. So yeah, I mean, if we're going to be looking at compost, we need to be looking at soil, because that's where compost ends up.
Does anyone else have anything about compost or biosolids, ag, before we switch topics? Really brief update. The Plastiverse team has just added a new functionality on their website. It's a forum that allows anyone to ask questions. It's kind of like Reddit, but only for plastic pollution researchers. Notably, we have a sale, trade, borrow, need page there. So if anyone has or wants to find sampling equipment or monitoring equipment or really anything else that's related to plastic pollution, that's a good place to start. It's kind of like a Craigslist just for microplastics researchers. We also have, for those that haven't checked out the website, we also have a toolkit. Check out the tools tab. You can find just about anything that's related to plastic pollution research. And we've sort of been slowly expanding it beyond just plastic pollution, adding a little bit about the ocean and other topics that are sort of difficult to disentangle. So yeah, check it out if you're as like a first step for trying to find something, databases, tools, resources, that sort of thing. And that's all for Plastiverse. Did anyone else have anything that they want to bring up? Alrighty, well, we will give you all 14 minutes left, or back to your day. Shelly, did you want to say something?
Oh, I was just, do we have something on the books already for the next meeting, or is that something that we have yet to finalize?
We have yet to set the date for the next meeting, but if you have a suggested topic or speaker, I'd love to hear that.
Definitely. It's nothing new, but I want to, it's stuff that the leadership has talked about already, and I just, to invite them, I just want to get a date, some dates in mind so that I can solidify that.
We will solidify the date by the end of this week.
Sounds good.
Awesome, thank you everyone. And if Shelly and Monica and Alma could just hang around, that'd be great.
Thank you all.
Thanks so much.
Thanks everyone.
Thank
Have
you.
a great rest of your day.
Thanks, Scott. Thanks, everybody. Bye for now.
Thanks, Terry.
I wonder if some people have their Zoom on and they're no longer at their desks. Scott, I'll just start since
Yeah, go for it.
for the announcement of our work group meeting for the February 6th. What's the best information? Should I have an outline, or should I just put a save the date out there? Or should I make my own calendar invite and forward that ICS file to you? What's the best way to do it for the listserv?
Yeah, I haven't worked with, oh, you mean for the meeting?
Yeah, to put out in a meeting announcement for the sampling analysis playbook work group.
If you just send me the details, the calendar details, then I can make a announcement through the listserv. I don't want to give everyone the calendar invite, because then a lot of people that don't actually want to attend will probably show up accidentally. So I think it'd be best if we just say, this is the time, this is the meeting link.
Okay, and then do I need a Zoom link at that time too? Because I think Shelly would provide that, right?
Yes, and Shelly's out today, so if you could just
or I could
you can
see,
do that.
I could host. It's just that it's not my account, it's my department's account.
Yeah,
So,
let's either one will probably work, but we'll need to ask Shelly before we get permission to use that.
all right. Maybe I'm just in, because it's coming up, maybe we should just put it out and then send an update with the link when we have it, because I want people to hold the date.
Okay, and that was for let's see, it was for
February
the February 6th, 1 to 2:30.
Yes, yes.
Okay, yeah, I'll make a note of that. I'll send that out today just to save the date.
Awesome,
Everyone.
perfect.
And
Thank you very
then
much.
did we want to set a date for the next quarterly meeting right now? Just to make sure that all of the work group leads can make it.
Yeah, except for not knowing Shelly's availability. But yeah.
Yeah, it's a little bit tricky.
I think Terry
can-
got off too, if you want to have her on also.
I'm sorry, what was that, Brent?
Yeah, I was saying that Terry Slipko also logged off, I believe.
I mean, we can look at a few dates. We'll just pick like 2 or 3 times that work for everyone on the call right now.
I like that.
Plan B and C. So 4 months, or sorry, actually 3 months from today would be the week of April 10th through the 14th. I think this time slot 11 to 12 has been working, or 11 to 1 has been working really well for people.
Mhm.
So that Monday is the SFEI microplastics work group, so definitely don't want to schedule it then. But for the rest of the week, it looks like I'm free.
Yep, I'm free too that week.
Likewise here.
This time works for me Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday.
And I'm free. The only thing I see is that the microplastic data portal hackathon that Wynn has an ongoing calendar invite. So other than that, it's pretty free.
Oh, what day was that?
They're on Wednesdays from 11 to 1.
Ah, okay. So really, we've
Or no,
got
I'm sorry, 12 to 3.
12 to 3. All right.
Yeah.
So April 11th and 13th are potential dates. And then just in case, would anyone be available April 18th through the 20th?
Yep, I'm here.
Yeah, this is Brent. All those days work for me.
Cool.
For me, it's there's a yeah, I have a CTAG planning meeting. Pretty much, well, it ends at 1, so it would have to be an afternoon meeting. I think Shelly has a conflict with Tuesday and Thursday afternoons, so I just have to make sure, we'd have to make sure that 11 to 1 would work. But yeah, other than that, the 18th and 19th look good, except for the data portal is also 12 to 3 that day
On the
of the
19th.
19th.
So if Shelly Moore has a conflict on Tuesdays and Thursdays, then
It just in the after, yeah, it might. Let me see if I wrote down, I think she has. Yeah, it might be just, I think she can do until like a 1 o'clock, that would be fine.
okay,
Let's go for that, and then if it's not, then we can retool.
cool. Yeah, those three options, we should be able to find something.
Yeah.
And then did anyone have anything in mind for speakers?
Yeah, good question.
Or the
Yes.
topic?
Yes, I'm just what we talked about in our planning meeting. So I have you'd written it down on when you were taking notes, Scott.
Yes.
It was
in
people who talked from the
we're talking about the contamination paper, getting in touch with the lead author. I can't remember her name, but the second author is Rachel Miller from the Horrible fame. And there's the Monica mentioned just today we're talking about possibly having an update on the ASTM, the pyrolysis UCMS. It doesn't have to be ASTM. It could be a laboratory doing the work. It could be the software. It could be about the heart, the instrument itself. We could do a lot of, or just application. We could have one of those speakers come and join. And then what else did we talk about? There was another one.
I thought there was another one from the ASTM conference we went to. I don't know why this can't stay in my mind.
Yeah. Oh, well, I think we were going to talk about the sampler itself, because we had a sampling specific meeting theme the last time, right? And so we didn't get to hear from Bill Robertson on the ASTM sample collection, just applicability to stormwater and open ocean and that kind of thing, where a closed system is not, you'd have to have a different closed system. So, but that's, yeah, I'm trying to think if there was another one from, from the ASTM symposium, we had the other speaker that had used the collection method on a lake, right?
Right, we had
kind of stream, yeah.
I guess I'm wondering if we should do one whole theme on analysis, like how we identify microplastics. Just thinking about how many questions we had today of like, what is ATR? Like maybe it'd be helpful for the community to do one whole meeting centered around kind of basics and applications and problems for like ATR, ramen, and I guess pyrolysis, GCMS. And then maybe we do one on novel new technologies. So maybe we want to do that as its own theme.
Yeah, I mean, that could be a lot for sure. I like that. Like that would be a good training resource too, that we could point people back to the recording for.
Yeah, I would love that, because I often get questions on basics of FTIR. So.
Right, and we can even do, we can either do tags or a separate library, or however we want to organize things. I haven't played around with the group libraries to see if, I don't think you can do sub libraries in a group library. If you could, it'd be cool to have like a, methods 101, like just, a survey of what's out there and, applications, that kind of thing.
There was also a bit of chat thinking back about kind of what people were talking about today about contamination did come up a few times. So that paper you mentioned, Shelly, is really on like, are we contaminating our samples in the field?
Yes.
So I wonder if we want to have someone talk about how we do this, how we handle this in the laboratory. And maybe also like how we correct for that in the laboratory, and but in all cases how we correct for this issue. And that also help then make people more aware of like, this is a problem and we have a way of dealing with it, right?
Yes, and that's a really good point because that's not standardized. And so, you know, whether it's, you know, okay, we know we used orange buckets, so we're not doing any orange particles, you know, we'll discount that. That's one way. And then there's other ways where whether you're very specific or you just flag it, but you don't take it out of the data. There's lots of ways of handling that. Yeah, I've heard Harry Allen give presentations about just handling that kind of thing and dealing with the zombies of data analysis, the Dennis Helsel things with non-detects is another one that kind of, you know, how do you deal with those things that are not like the core of your data, you're not sure how to wrap all that together. I could see doing something like that. And contaminants are one of those types of data.
So, okay, so we're thinking the contamination paper, are we contaminating our samples, the one that Miller's and co-author on?
Yes.
Something about ASTM sampling.
ASTM, we could get a well, yeah, we're gonna get we were talking about doing the environmental sampling, because I mean we've kind of referenced it for, you know, comparison to drinking water, you know, developing that closed system, you know, that kind of thing, but we want to talk about it in other aspects. Maybe that would be helpful. It's similar to what we saw for ocean diagnostics, except much higher volume. So, yeah, this is actually just a planning meeting, but we've got some folks in the room because we didn't break out into our own private room. But hi, Jared.
Hi, I had to step out of my office and I missed the breakout section and it sent me to a breakout where no one was there. So I have to get to another meeting, but I just heard this conversation. I thought I should jump in for a second or two. So we have, I'm Jared Voskel-Casas, Manager of Regulatory Affairs, working with the POTWs on the OPC study. We have several agencies that are sampling right now, but several have had to delay sampling either because of rain or union issues. We're going to proceed, I think, later this month once we kind of get through the current batch of storms, but they are doing the auto sampler as well as the ASTM sample grab. And I kind of was curious how that data might be incorporated into the OPC SWRCB study they're doing. I mentioned it to them last month when I did some meetings with them, and you know, I think we paid for having it analyzed and as kind of a follow-along report, but just thought to mention all that for you all as you're discussing this, and I do have to run to another meeting. So
I think that's an excellent thing to bring up. I'm curious, there's going to be a whole workshop on sample collection that SWRCB is going to be hosting this spring, I believe. Is it this spring? And I've talked to Leah about it. She's mentioned it a few times, and just all the sample collection work, how that we're going to tie all that in together with, you know, the playbook and really bring everything together. And I'm not, you know, I think we need a lot more collaboration to really bring it together so we don't have disparate sources.
Yeah, have you been able to comment on the SWRCB kind of proposal? Have you seen that yet or not? Have they written it
out? The RFP for vendors?
Yeah.
I haven't.
Well,
I've just been in the meeting.
The document they mentioned at the last commission meeting when they wanted the commissioners to kind of sign off on, it was more of like a concept approval than a written document, but they said they would share a written document for this study.
Oh, no, I don't think I've seen that. I've seen the RFP, and they had a meeting for the RFP earlier this week for people who are interested in applying to get paid to do microplastics analysis.
Okay.
And so that, if that's available, I can forward it to you if you'd like.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And so The work plan has not come out yet, though.
Okay.
That's just the RFP. We are expecting the draft work plan soon. And, you know, it's interesting because like Leah said, it's a very kind of like whoever wants to participate can, and but it's pay to play. You know, you're using your own resources to play. Microplastics is a little bit different because OPC is putting in a lot of money to augment the study so that, because we don't have a lot of labs that are set up. So it's going to help more participants. But typically, when you have all the participants who are actually doing the either sampling or analysis, they're the ones around the table kind of guiding the study. And we have a lot of people guiding the study who are not yet players. They're hoping to be if they respond to the RFP, they make a bid. So we don't know who those labs are going to be yet. We know that there are some committed, like SWRCB facility, and then OCSAN. You know, OCSAN will definitely be doing some samples, and SWRCB's offered their facility for others to use. So we have some a couple dedicated labs. We need more. And then we kind of know that it's going to be estuary strata and possibly intershelf. So
Sorry, I got to hop on another call right now.
I do too. Good to see you, Scott. Thank you.
Good to see you, Jared.
Good meeting today. All right, bye.
And Monica, I appreciated the breakout rooms. I kind of get the concept. We could just like get our own private one, and then
Yeah,
we should do that next time.
a good idea. Okay, do we have a kind of a plan for who we're inviting? I just want to make sure.
So I'm gonna, like, my to-dos are to invite the co-authors of the field contamination paper.
Great.
I could look up some lab contamination sources. And I mean, I love, because we have these group libraries now, I want to like have references ready for people like ahead of the meeting. We can have our little library and go, okay, you know, and so if we find a good person for that, that'd be great. I know SFEI did a lot of work, like lessons learned, because they couldn't use their water column sample for their regional study because it was so contaminated. The contaminants overwhelmed. Yeah, they couldn't tell contaminant signal from.
What method were they using for collection?
But yeah, I'm not sure, but I know that there was just a lot of, this was like pre ASTM, but yeah. But you know, so Ezra Miller or Diana Lynn or Becky Sutton could speak to that. I think Ezra was the lead author on the lessons learned, but they did a really great webinar on you know, QA/QC type of issues for microplastics that were, I really want to bring those, you know, when we do these studies, following up and being really honest about like, okay, here's what went wrong and here's what to do better next time. Bringing that to, because so much goes wrong and you try not to highlight that in your publication, but like if we can, you know, like have a focus on like stuff goes wrong. That'd be a cool theme, you know, and kind of addressing those things when they go wrong, like contamination and that kind of thing. All right, so again, Rachel Miller et al. Analysis, contamination source. Let's put our heads together and maybe come up with someone to invite. And then I've got the, I'll talk with Bill and Harry about the, would we want to do, because we haven't heard about sample collection from ASTM yet, have we?
I don't think so.
Okay, all right. And then I mentioned the precision paper because the publication came out, but they presented, that was like our first meeting.
Right.
They presented when it was, I think it was in draft.
Yep, that sounds
But
good.
yeah.
Cool. Okay, I like that. Brent?
The only thing I would offer is that for some of the updates we had today, an update might even be pretty handy in 3 months down the road.
It's true.
Yes.
Let's keep that in mind.
I mean, you don't want to duplicate it too much and, you know, give the same people another 20 minutes, of course, but if you can ask them to give them even like a lightning update of 5 or 10 real quick, that could be pretty valuable.
Yeah, totally. Definitely like maybe like if there's RFPs available that people should be, if they're still open.
Yeah, the progress of the validation study or whatever,
Yep,
what if OPC selected a contractor and what they're doing in their RFPs.
Yeah, it's a great idea.
Yeah, also the sample collection workshop.
Oh yeah.
My understanding, and it might have changed, but is that it's going to be like a closed kind of an invitee only kind of thing, and then they'll put out their findings. I would love to see that at least as a forum that like you could watch, or if they want to keep it closed, but some way of kind of being able to give feedback after the fact, something like that.
Yeah.
Are you sure it's going to be closed? I mean, that would be really valuable to be on.
I agree.
I mean, I'm not doing sampling myself, obviously, but I would love to hear the issues.
Me too. Me too. And also the players, like, yeah, I agree. And it was the first thing I asked Leah. I was like, hey, is that going to be open? She's like, yeah. So I think, I think it's maybe an issue of too many cooks in the kitchen or something, but definitely there will be some drafts to review at some point that I'll have access to.
Well, and I know in the past they've been good about, maybe in the past they definitely limited who could participate in these things, but then they've always had workshops afterwards explaining what happened. That's been my experience with a lot of these types of, like the laboratory comparison study and stuff. Like we asked to join way too late, and but luckily they were like, well, come join our workshops instead. So I still was able to learn, my students were able to learn. That is, and I get it, on one hand, I'm like, I was kind of annoyed, but then I was like, whatever, like, you have to cap these things at a certain point. But
I asked at the beginning and was like, well, I'm not in a lab, so
yeah.
But yeah, we had our lab guy, he was retired, so he was on it, but he's gone, Steve Carr. But I'll follow up with Leah and see if it'd be great to, just that connection between our work group and feels like we should have a representative. I bet Scott's going to be there maybe, but it would be nice to have kind of a work group representative.
Yeah, and then I think maybe also for the Bight one.
I'm heavily involved in all of that. Great. So they have their next meeting. When is their next meeting? We had one originally scheduled for this week or last week, and it got canceled because the work plan is going to come out. So that's the next thing, is the draft work plan. And then so we're gonna, I think our next meeting is to kind of approve it. Let's see. I don't see our next meeting. Yeah, I don't see our next meeting in my notes, but I will. Yeah. I think it's still open, but again, that was an interesting one because we have a lot of people, Andrew Gray and Suzanne Brander, and some CSU professors were all there. And I think they're there in the capacity to learn more and to have input before they bid. And I could be wrong about that, but that was the sense I got, which is a very different, SCWRP has made announcements before that, like, we don't need more backseat drivers. So unless you're ready with a field crew or some kind of contribution to the project, we don't need a lot of opinions, about how to do it. So we will see.
I don't need more samples, so
I'm concerned about contamination. Andrew Gray presented some draft, contamination data from field, and the take home was that it was the the shelf samples were so chock full of microplastics that the contaminants just didn't matter.
Right. Yeah. And that's what we
And
hope, right?
it
We
was
at
just
least
like
hope.
orders of magnitude, so it didn't matter. And they presented some kind of draft data on that, but which we can't share. But you know, that's for that side. And then also OCSAN put some collection plates out while they were collecting. And but they did it like they just opened it up and then they were like doing their whole thing. And then and I guess for a one-to-one comparison, you would just have it open while the sample's exposed and being plated out. And so it was higher levels than you would expect if it was a shorter amount of time. But and they said it was like a very small amount and they showed it, but to me it looked significant enough to warrant, you know, what do you do with those numbers, that kind of discussion. I just think that would be really handy. And also maybe that, I could see if Harry or someone else in general. I mean, that's when you talk about contaminants, I mean, it's universal, you know, it does not just microplastics, but like asbestos, all kinds of things where they're using particles, physical particles or PFAS, something like that.
Yeah, totally. I hear you.
Yeah, great idea. So I know you're trying to do the wrap up. So we've got Miller paper, ASTM environmental sampling, updates, you know, potential updates, and then with like sample collection, OPC. I don't think Bight will have, it'll just be that, you know, sampling is started. No, I'm sorry. Sampling doesn't start till July 1st. That's like the official kickoff of Bight, of the sampling, unless there's some kind of stormwater element, which there isn't. So samples won't be collected until after our next meeting. So I don't think Bight would be an update, except for the work plan. The work plan will be approved, well approved by July. So that's the next thing is reviewing the draft work plan for that. But anything else?
Sounds good.
Yep.
I'm just going to write down what to do with contaminant, with QA/QC data.
Cool.
Maybe?
Yeah, I took some good notes also today, so I'll just email all of you directly with my notes.
Okay.
So this way we have a record of what we talked about and everything. So
yeah. Okay. Great. Yeah, I'm gonna have to review this meeting because it's hard for me to really soak it in when I'm about to speak.
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys are the same way.
And then sometimes I'm like, oh, I'm in meaning to take notes, but I get like kind of sucked into what we're talking about, and I'm like, oh shoot, I totally didn't follow.
Yeah, or if you're the one presenting, like you can't take notes on your own stuff. Like, what did I say?
Or else I'm taking notes and then I miss the next thing that gets said because I'm writing down something I thought was valuable.
I know.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Anyways.
All right. Thank you so much for keeping us organized, Monica. And good meeting. And I'll send out the just the direct. You know, as I was kind of putting that together for like just to show, I invited a couple people just to throw it on. But Monica, you're specifically on. You're like the, you know, like the top level, but then also on the consumer messaging, right? Is that, do I have that right? Or which?
For what?
For just the microplastics, what are we, subcommittee?
Oh, the Google Drive?
No, just leadership in general.
Oh, yeah. I mean,
I know that's the first thing he's presented, but I'd
like to be involved also though with the playbook stuff. I won't be as involved.
All right. I'll just invite all of us to all of them. And then I can set, the thing is, it would be nice to let people add articles, but then I think that same permission is also they could edit existing citations or delete them, and that scares me a little bit. Yeah. So for yours, I made it that way where they could do that, but for mine, I kind of closed it down a little bit more to only admins can can
Okay, got
change the citations. And so I can make you guys admins, and then you can just change the settings
That'd be great.
possibly.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, probably the three of us and Scott. Awesome. Okay, I'll send these notes out, and it was great to see you all.
You too.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.